one word or one sentence max, what would be your definition of enterprise transformation? Ursula.
Okay, from an Atos or from a CEO perspective, my ideal world is to have 10,000 adaptive and constantly learning technologists. When I have achieved that, I'm a very happy woman.
Okay. Shane?
Simplification.
Simplification.
You said one word, right?
Dave?
I'm with Shane. You asked for one word. I'm just going to say humans.
And Bob?
Less is more. It's kind of like simplification. Fewer letters, 3 words, but really all around process redesign to take steps out of processes to help make our own business and our customers more efficient and effective.
It was a long sentence, but still a sentence. Thank you. So, Ursula, what have you done at Atos, or what have you seen your customers doing in terms of changing their organization to enable enterprise transformation?
Probably 2 things. Again, from an Atos perspective, often what we have done, clearly acquisitions, mergers. We have achieved significant growth and change through that. But if I look at some of our clients who are trying to find their way through into the digital world and finding out what digital transformation means for them, several starting actually with the workplace, with the belief that if I can change the workplace of my organization, of my staff, I can help them to find a way to serve their clients in the right way. And I use the example of Pearson's, which clearly as a publisher, education provider needed to move into the digital world. And by saying, I actually give my staff the choice between Microsoft and Google, and they can choose, and we will connect those 2 applications, they really have driven within probably 18 months a completely digital workplace. And it started very simple with the CIO saying, hiring a very small team and saying, you solve this problem. And it went out in guerrilla, real entrepreneurial, no rules. Every corporate IT rule was probably broken when they were setting that up. But it was essentially allowing that entrepreneurship to thrive, to carry out that innovation into the organization. It worked very effectively for them, and I've seen that in other of our clients working well as well.
Okay. Shane, having in mind that General Electric is known for being a very well business division aligned type of company, you are in charge of shared services, right, which is kind of counterintuitive to what we think about GE. So what kind of organization changes have you brought into GE to transform the company?
Well, look, I think the company really is focused on simplification. For us, that means 2 things, right? It means operating at a competitive cost structure and operating at a speed that the market expects us to operate at. To do that, we established Global Operations, which is a multifunctional shared service operation. And our primary goal is really to create capacity. And we talk about creating capacity for growth, and that's really to create capacity not just for us and our processes to do, we talk about more with less, we're actually trying to do less with less, to actually remove things as well, but also create capacity for our business teams that are front-facing in the marketplaces to really focus on what they need to focus on. So that's on strategic investments and NPI and selling to the customers and customer interactions, so that the business-facing teams aren't having to worry about accounts payable processing or invoice collections or different things like that. So that's really our purpose.
And here you just mentioned 2 back offices processes. Are you covering also front office type of activities?
Yeah, it's been quite interesting. When you get into this, you assume it's all about finance, HR, IT, and legal. But what we've really learned is that there's huge opportunity in supply chain, a huge opportunity in commercial, and huge opportunity in engineering. So we actually have our leader of global operations supply chain here today, and that's Maria, and that's we're working through a number of different processes. So things on the commercial side, like working on customer onboarding, processes that used to be done hundreds of times across all the various businesses, just getting to one customer list and one set of customer master data to allow us to do this once, so a sales guy out in the field doesn't have to run around collecting all this information when they need to sell to that particular customer. So there's a tremendous amount of every process or every function has got these back office type activities that they need to enable them, and that's really what we're focused on delivering for each of these functions.
Okay, thank you. Dave, moving to another subject about enterprise transformation. What do you think leaders are, let's say, can do in order to accelerate business transformation, new business model implementation, and therefore transformation for the total company?
I actually think there's two things leaders need to do, and it's just two, right? So first thing a good leader needs to do is to make sure that everybody in the organization understands what the outcome of the organization is. So what is it that this organization is trying to do? We talked about it earlier with Mark about a purpose, right? So they establish that. Everybody, I can go to anywhere in the organization, what is it we're doing? And it's not, I'm making this product, it's, I'm delivering this transformation. And then when they've done that, they have to do the second crucial thing as a leader. Get out of the way, right? Just step back. Enable the people to do the work. Right. That's what makes the difference. That's where you get engagement. That's where you get the passion of people to shine through. If you try to manage people, dictate what they do, you're just going to get in the way.
Okay. Bob, what your perspective on leadership and how can leaders really drive?
Well, I like Dave's comments because I do think the critical role of the leader is to paint a vision of where the organization can get to, and in our case, what we can do for our clients. But the second point really caught my attention because I really do believe that that's right. You have to empower your team and not overmanage. I have 20 direct reports purposely. Some of them are in the room. They get very little inspection. You try to get the best possible quality of leaders as a piece of your organization, and then give them advice, counsel, direction when they need it, not when you want to kind of inspect them and tell them what to do.
Yep.
If I could interject as well, because the interesting bit I find myself in as well is how do you do that? How do you free up actually what we call the digital natives? They are the youngsters in our organization. They're the graduates, the interns which we have hired. So when we are talking about getting out of the way, we are talking about our direct reports, our managers, but they are actually not the ones, including who know how to drive digital transformations or who live in that world of digital natives.
Do you not
so I think the question for us is to get so much out of the way that we're letting them come and reverse mentor and tell us how actually in this world we should operate and become familiar.
You know, I think that's a bit of a myth, though, increasingly, about it's just the kids that get technology. You know, so over time, this isn't about millennials, it's not about natives, it's just about everybody.
But it's not only about technology, it's also their behavior. As a senior exec in a senior company, you are used to work in a hierarchy, not to share all your presentations with all your data, all your thoughts with the whole of organization. If you're grown up with Facebook, and with WhatsApp, you're used to that. And that's a fundamental difference in managed behavior. I find technology actually the easier part in this whole transformation. It's real management change. And that's not as easily done because we have grown up, we are where we are because we are good at managing in that type of organization. And so to step away is actually very difficult.
Mm. You spoke about reverse mentoring, and I've heard about an experience run by a huge insurance company where the CEO has decided to give to each of his first-line members a youngster, 25 to 30 years old max, as a coach in terms of new technology, digital alternatives to running business. Have you done such a thing in your different companies?
We did it as part of the zero email rollout. We bought a company called Blue Kiwi, which is a Facebook equivalent for an enterprise. And I had this graduate coming every week talking to me. I looked at him, he looked at me. We were really two worlds coming together. Technology was just one of the examples. And we he said, why don't you do this? And I said, really? Change that with, give that to 10,000 people like that? That was a complete conversation. It was a conversation between the two of us of different ways of seeing the world.
Okay. Shane, move to another subject, driving enterprise transformation. You can do it in-house with your own people. You can partner with someone from outside, or you can outsource to a provider. How do you make arbitrage? What is your thinking process in driving transformation with these three type of modes?
Yeah, well, I think most companies have recognized that the models are changing. I think when we went through the first period of transformation, it was all about outsourcing. That became a little bit, as I described, the your mess for less model, and eventually runs out of steam. So now we've recognized this. We're working on more of what I call a captive hybrid model, where the role of partners changes. So we need partners who, I call it, they've got to help us imagine the possible in terms of what can be done around technology, and bring more value than just labor arbitrage that might have been in the first wave of outsourcing, because the world has just become so complex with so many different technologies now. It's really about how we make the right choices, and we can't know all the answers ourselves, but we also don't want to cede the ability to be able to re-engineer and kind of design our processes in the right way. So how we work with partners, I think, has evolved.
Bob, on this different kind of partnership or outsourcing, in-housing, what is your perspective?
I think you see more and more in the marketplace where businesses look to have an ecosystem of partners, whether the role is the old role of your mess for less, or whether it's a more advanced role of really playing more of a leadership position in selected places in their, in their business processes. And I think that, really critical is then, when you're on the supplier side, which obviously I am, really critical is to align exceptionally well with the client. And that's a cultural, we're not perfect, we've got a big business, but when you go out in the delivery centers, and does it matter whether it's finance and accounting or customer care or a vertical play that's dedicated to an industry, and the people feel like they are members of the client. They support Atos, or they support GE, they support Microsoft, then to me that's the magic. They may have a Xerox paycheck, but they feel like they are part of that client team. That, I think, is a big, big piece of it. And Shane's point I do agree with. It's not just a your mess for less model anymore. Many clients are really on the what value, how can I get an improved outcome from leveraging skills and talent in a provider, but that would be what I would share.
Change gear again. Dave, we speak a lot about social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. Specific question around big data. How do you envision big data to be maybe the cause of the disruption, or maybe the solution to the disruption? So how do you think about big data?
Well, you're right, Jack, it's both, right? So it's the disruption, but it's also the solution. But the thing that bothers me, when we talk about big data, everybody fixates on the data, but it's what you do with it that makes a difference. Right. And I think increasingly we're seeing a new generation of intelligent services that start to hoover up that data. And they start to make sense of it and bring it to the individual or the organization at the right moment in time so that they can do something with it. But it's the algorithms that really are the power. So I'll give you one example, right? So I have this sort of complete over-the-top statement, which is big data will change what it means to be human, right? And everyone's just like, you're full of whatever. But I'm being polite. And the thing is, when you have enough data, you can do incredible things. We announced last year, and you can have a beta of this product, real-time speech-to-speech language translation, right, using Skype. That's a big data service, because we take the data of 2 languages, we spot patterns in the data, and now we can do real-time language translation. I've got a 9-year-old son, right? Do I bother to get him to learn a foreign language at school? Because the chances are, when he enters his world of work, that would be a redundant skill. Now, I get that's provocative. I get there are lots of reasons why we learn foreign languages, but that's the transformational nature of big data. But you've got to add the algorithms to make it work.
On the same subject, big data and the real examples where you really used it and transformed the business process thanks to big data and analytics.
Again, at the moment, I think that the key is at the moment really a lot of companies are still trying to find out where it really adds business value. So one example, which in the retail world, working with a partner called Blue Yonder, who are coming out of CERN, where they did the analyzing data in the supermarket in the shelves. and using that to place the best products in the best way. So there is one area. Others is clearly from a Jeep, looking at machine data and saying predictive maintenance when our machine parts are coming out. But at the moment, again, the hype is there. Everybody talks about big data, but what is the real business use? And that's where I think companies really need to step back and say, where do I think I can make money? Where does it help me to save costs? Where's the operational excellence versus trying to find a solution for everything and anything, and it's the nirvana. So again, finding the use cases, which I think you have demonstrated, you mentioned as well, is absolutely key.
Okay. Any other comments on big data or analytics? No? Dave and Peter mentioned the fact that we speak about two-speed IT, or other use the terminology of bimodal IT or CIO. So managing risk at the same time as being innovative, being safe and disruptive at the same time. What is the way you look at that?
Again, it's a huge pressure onto our organization, but also the clients, of course, we're serving, because the CIO, of course, is asked to do less with the existing IT infrastructure, and on the other hand, run very, very fast with the digital world. And the two, I mean, from our perspective, is really looking at the two things in two separate, in separate ways, and saying, this is how do I operate operational performance, operational excellence versus creativity, innovation, and exploration. Two very, very different things. But risk and security, of course, especially in the digital world, is a key consideration. And the first recommendation I would actually ask everybody, it needs to be CEO, CX level topic. If you think you can delegate it to a head of security or to a head of, the CIO, that's the wrong place. Our mind was very, it helps you to crystallize, to have real security threats. I had the pleasure of once having Anonymous targeting us here in the UK. I had 72 hours to make sure us and our systems, all our clients were safe. It was really amazing what you can do in 72 hours. And equally, we are the partner for the IOC, so we're running the Olympics. And the Olympics are the most targeted event from a security hacking perspective. So again, it really teaches you that you as a management team need to understand technology, but you also, of course, need to understand which processes you have, where actually a risk are, and last but not least, people. At the end of the day, it's still our people who are one of the biggest security risks in any organization, and therefore, again, from my perspective, it's as simple as you need to care as a senior manager about the security in a digital world. You need to always think about you could end up very easily on the front page of any newspaper because you lost your client's data.
And Shane, from your experience at GE, I mean, being in charge of building the shared services for the line of businesses, they are to some extent losing ownership of very critical business process. How did you manage? Was that a conflictual debate to give you responsibility to manage critical process for them?
Yeah, look, it's a hard discussion, right? Nobody likes to give up control, but when you start to make the changes that we've made around culture and what's important, like putting the customer first, for example, and getting the businesses to focus on what matters to them in their marketplace, it becomes a much easier discussion. But it has to be collaborative, right? So we really have what we call a push model, right? So the businesses send stuff to us versus us going in and saying, we're going to take this from you. The we're going to take stuff from you works to a point, and then it stops working. The kind of resistance goes underground. So you got to continue to work this very collaboratively, I would say. And then it's an ongoing dialogue. I think the conversation on risk is pretty interesting because we hear risk all the time. I think it's important to actually understand what the real risks to the businesses are, and then stop people using risk as an excuse for not changing, right? Because that's what we encounter all the time. And to be honest, there's a greater risk to us in this transformation of going too slow as there is of going too fast. And it's, how do you not let people get in the way of that? And
exactly the balance a senior manager should strike.
Right.
What risk do I want to take versus I delegate it down?
And are you linked with your customers via a kind of SLA definition? Do you go to a kind of outcome-based pricing?
We did a couple of things that were relatively controversial. We said no SLAs.
No SLAs.
Right, and it was quite an interesting debate. You know, we had a previous service organization that had SLAs. They had 3,000 of them, negotiated every year, et cetera. We said, but it was costing about 10% of the cost structure to manage that process. So we said, okay, well, we're not going to do SLAs. The team wanted to do them, and we said, okay, we'll do them on one condition. Bring me one of the 3,000 that's been in place for over 10 years that has ever been enforced. Okay. And of course, they're internal documents that, you know, are basically a false level of security. So now we try and work on input and output metrics. So, you know, there are JVs and other things where we have to have more of an arm's length situation, so we deal with that. But we've taken our, you know, contracts between our countries from a tax base. That's one page now, and that satisfies tax and legal requirements, and then we operate within that overall MSA agreement. But that saved us about 10% in our cost structure. So it's a question of the trade-off in terms of how much you want to have.
We have one SLA for the IOC contract. We are running the Olympics IT, and we have one SLA.
Which
only. The results need to be out in 0.03 seconds to the world, but nothing else matters. Because the risk to us to fail is so high. It's a very public failure. So again, it's SLAs really don't matter in that sense.
It's input and output metrics,
very great thoughts.
You touch on this subject at some point, Shane, speaking about culture. So what kind of role does play management behavior, management style, culture into the transformation of a company?
It's the number one item that has to be addressed, because if you don't get the culture of the company thinking about simplification the right way, thinking about putting the customer first, it's almost, you know, people think, and we started this journey by saying, well, give us a mandate to go do shared services, right? But when you actually got a mandate, right, you actually meet resistance in a different way. Yeah. So the only way you fix not having a mandate is basically to have the right culture. And I almost likened it to the Qin dynasty in China back, 2,000 years ago, where they brought in one currency and one system of governance, and then eventually it fell apart, right, because it's not sustainable. And that's the difference between culture and mandate. So you've got to get the culture right.
But Shane or any other panelist, what have you done to translate culture into, I don't know, compensation plans or appraisal process or how you reward or promote guys? So a real life example of what you have done to show that you were serious about that. Any good example to share?
No, I can give you a Microsoft example, right? So part of the problem with how people are measured and paid is typically they're paid on the processes they do and the teams that they work within. And that drives a really insular behavior. It reinforces all of the silos. One of the things Microsoft did about 3 years ago now is we changed from, I used to get paid on the performance of my team. So frankly, I only cared about the performance of my team, right? So they changed that. So yeah, I'm slightly measured on the performance of my team. Now there's a metric that basically says, what's my contribution to the overall company? Oh my God, let me tell you about the cultural change that's driven inside Microsoft. Because now I care about all these other business units that I'm not even connected to. And so I start to get engaged, they're open to the engagement. And I guess the Microsoft example, the bit that makes it sort of special is that the magic of Microsoft is not the individual products or the individual teams, it's the beautiful thing that happens when you stitch them all together. And so they've unlocked that by just changing the way that we're measured, by changing the way our focus is about that company contribution against the outcome that I talked about earlier. That's been really, really different for us.
Yeah, we talk about the same thing in terms of, getting the head, the heart, and the wallet aligned. So simplification and what we're driving there has been supported by what we call our beliefs now. 5 statements in terms of, how we're expected to show up to work as a team, and then our incentive compensation is directly linked to exactly what Dave talked about, and that's driven, profound change in terms of the way teams and people show up within the organization. But if you don't do something like that, then it's just you're relying on 1 or 2 people to drive the change, and it's just not going to work in a 300,000 person organization. Any
other best practice or any other ideas to share?
No, I would agree. You need structure and culture to work together. I have studied organizational theory, so the 2 together are really important. One alone will not be sustainable. So, and reward structure is, I think, still one of the the key behavior drivers.
We started with this panel asking you a question about, in one word or one sentence, how to describe enterprise transformation. I would like to finish now with a question for each of you regarding how would you measure your success in 1, 2, 3 years from now on the fact that, yeah, we have transformed our company. We are a different company. What is the way to measure that?
Well, I would say for us, we're really, this is going to be somewhat macro level, but we really have a kind of a 3 constituency lens. And we try to think about the client view, our people, and obviously our shareholders. And so, you know, you look and you say, hey, we've made progress, but our metric for a couple of years from now, are we really an employer of choice? So do we have both a skill base and a retention rate that causes us to say, hey, we got the talent that we need, people stay, we're an employer of choice. From a client standpoint, this is a little bit aspirational because you're never going to maybe hit every element, but we're trying to have every client be referenceable. I want to be in a situation when a new client says, hey, who do you do work for? We give them the list of everybody. And we say, you know, we may not be perfect. I got 107,000 people, somebody might make a mistake one day, but every one of our clients, we're willing to share that these are the clients that we support. And obviously the marketplace will view whether we have revenue growth, acceleration, and margins, but you know, that's generally top of list for companies, and we're trying to make that visibly just one of 3 success variables. And if we do the first 2 with the employees and the clients, the last one will come.
Yeah, for us as a team, it's our contribution to value creation. So, I mean, it's quite, you know, we're on a journey of taking SG&A, selling general and admin expenses, down from 17.5% down to 12%. We're already at 14%. Shared services has played a big piece in that, and we've actually learned through this transformation that we can now start to play a similar role in terms of the improvement in gross margins. And it's really, that's going to be the benchmark of whether everything else that you've talked about has kind of come together.
And how long is the journey? 17 down to 12?
We've been at it so far now 3 years. So 17.5 to 14 is almost $4 billion worth of costs. So, I mean, the journey's been pretty successful so far, and we're going to continue that over the next couple of years.
Dave?
I mean, I think I'd echo what you said. I think there's an external measure, which is kind of like how the market views you, but for me, it's the internal thing. I think all of this, the success in transformation, comes down to your employees and whether they're engaged or not. So I think if I was to have to pick on one measure, it would be employee engagement.
You spoke about humans.
Yeah, that's it.
And how do you measure,
Well, that's the hard part, right? I mean, I'm sure the HR specialists will tell me there are lots of ways you can measure employee engagement. For me, it's the test you do every time you talk to somebody in your organization and you just see whether they care, not just about what they do, but the journey that the company's on. And that's the bit, and you can see that change. And if you see that to move, you see people engaging not just with their day job, but the broader thing, that's when you know you're onto something.
Last word to you, Ursula.
Knowing Atos and knowing the market we are in, which is Atos, just to give you a sense, 10 years ago we were 400 people in the UK, we're now 10,000. So again, that's not your usual leisurely expansion and growth. So very, very fast-moving company and changing. And of course, the technology industry in which we operate is the next 5 years. If I could predict where we all end up, I would be a very rich woman. And it's really therefore coming back to what I said at the beginning. If I have 10,000 or however many people I might have then, really engaged, digitally active and constantly learning employees, I think I would be in a very, very excellent place and our organization would be in a great place. So that's how I would measure whether I have achieved
Okay,
success.
thank you. That's all the time we have today. So Ursula, Dave, Shane, and Bob, thank you for joining us for the panel and sharing your experience about enterprise transformation. So I hope that you will join me in thanking them for their sharing their experience.
Thank you.